In progress.
Hi, my name's Jade, and today I'm going to be taking you through psychological support and self-care, teaching you some tips and strategies to support individuals experiencing mental ill health whilst prioritising self-care. But firstly, I would like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I'm recording this today in Ballarat, which is on the land of the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So my name is Jade. I'm a mental health practitioner, trainer and counsellor. Um, so I have about 15 years experience working in community services across kind of a range of different roles, including volunteer management, management of peer support programs, um, as well as being a mental health practitioner and a counsellor. A little bit of an overview of this workshop. It aims to teach simple, practical skills to help support the mental health of others. Um, Today's session will be exploring a few different things, including identifying signs of mental health concerns, when to initiate a discussion about mental health concerns, providing psychological support to someone in need, and then exploring some self-care tips and strategies, because obviously it's really important to make sure that you look after yourself, particularly when you've been looking after other people. And then lastly, we'll be looking at some possible referral pathways for additional support. I do want to say that this training doesn't aim to skill people up as professional mental health practitioners. It's just about providing you with some skills and some strategies so that you can support those around you and potentially then help refer them into professional support services. All right, so I'd just like to start off with this nice little quote, which is from Are You OK? Never underestimate the difference you can make by checking in on those around you. And I really like this little photo, which is actually, it's my daughter. She found a rock in a playground, which was actually kind of at the height of the first lockdown with COVID before we kind of knew exactly how long it was going to be dragging on for. And yeah, it says, be the rainbow in someone else's cloud. And it definitely brightened our day at the time. And I just thought it was a really cute photo to have in there. Um, but yeah, the importance of, I guess, checking in on those around you. Obviously, we don't really know what's going on for everyone else. But if you are worried about someone, you notice that they're not quite themselves, simply just asking the question, are you okay, can kind of make all the difference, and it helps people to realize that they're not alone. Um, we can all create a culture where people feel confident in asking and answering that simple yet important question. Um, so in today's session, as I've said, I'll be teaching you some practical skills which can help you identify when someone might not be okay, and ways in which you can support them. But firstly, I just want to explore this a little bit. What is mental health? Um, Mental health is a term that we hear all the time, but when we hear it, do we all know what it actually means? And are we all talking about the same thing? Um, Often the term mental health is frequently misunderstood and misused, and often in media, it's often misused. Um, Often when people are talking about mental health, they're talking actually about mental ill health and referring to mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, among others. But in actual fact, mental health is actually a state of well-being. So that according to the World Health Organization, it is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So it's very much when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about the positive. Um, I just wanted to, I guess, clarify that before we went any further. Mental ill health is when your mental health is declining and not well. Okay. So, um, now I want to explore some signs of sorry, I skipped ahead then. Some signs of mental health concerns. So there's some different things that you might be able to observe um, that are signs a person might be struggling with their mental health. Some are more subtle than others, and some signs will only be noticeable to people who are really close to them, but others will be noticeable by pretty well anyone who's around them. So there's behavioral changes that might be noticeable, such as the person's not really going out anymore, they're not getting things done like schoolwork or being as productive in the workplace. They might be withdrawing from close family and friends or relying on alcohol and other drugs. Not doing usual enjoyable activities, um, and unable to concentrate. They might be feeling some really strong feelings, such as being overwhelmed, guilty, irritable, frustrated, lacking in confidence, unhappy, indecisive, disappointed, miserable, sad. Um, and I guess on the feeling side of things, it's important to touch on that these really overwhelming and strong feelings that people might have when they're experiencing poor mental health can often play out um, in conflict. So I guess it's important for you to be mindful of that. If you're coming in contact with someone who's really irritable and seeming like they're really overreacting to a situation and it doesn't really make sense to you, then it's probably important for you to be mindful of this, that it's possible that what is going on actually isn't anything to do with you, or even the situation that you're in, but more to do with the fact that they might be struggling with their mental health, and that is playing out in them being more irritable um, and argumentative. So it's just good for you to have in the back of your mind, particularly when you come across something like that. Be mindful that you don't know what's going on in that person's life and err on the side of being compassionate rather than meeting their frustration and anger with anger. Um, there's also some different thoughts and physical changes that might be noticeable. Um, and thoughts are also a really big one. I think we all say much more critical and harsh things to ourselves than anyone else ever could. But particularly when we're struggling with our mental health, we might have thoughts such as, I'm a failure, it's all my fault. Nothing good ever happens to me. I'm worthless. Life's not worth living. People would be better off without me. And although you can't hear other people's thoughts, um, they might be verbalizing things like this to you, and saying these sorts of things. And if they're saying these sorts of things out loud, guaranteed what they're saying to themselves in their head is probably 10 times worse. Um, some physical changes that you might notice that the person's really tired all the time. They might be getting sick more often. Often when people first present to the GP, when they're experiencing mental ill health, they're actually going for physical reasons. So they might be going because they have a really bad backache and headaches. They're not sleeping well and they're catching everything. And often once it's explored further, it's actually they're actually all a flow-on effect of poor mental health. Your poor mental health absolutely impacts your physical health. So it's an important one for people to be mindful of. Things like stomach aches, back pain, they're all quite common for people experiencing mental ill health. And yeah, problems sleeping, loss or change of appetite. So it can be an increase in appetite or a loss. So significant weight loss or weight gain can be symptoms of poor mental health. Now, next up, I want to show you a little clip. Before we, I guess, talk any further about how to reach out to someone to discuss their mental health, I want to show you this short clip, which is about fight, flight, freeze instinct, because it plays a really big part in people's mental health and how they respond to things and to people. If you have heard about fight, flight, freeze instinct before, you've probably heard about it in the context of us being in a situation of kind of a life or death situation. And this is when instinctively we will either fight, go into fight mode, flight, so we're fleeing, running away, or freezing. And it's a real instinctual response. It's something that we really don't have an awful lot of control over. And it's kind of it's part of our brain structure, which is really quite old and been there for a really long time. And I guess it's been there since we were potentially going to be hunted down by wild animals. Unfortunately, though, it does malfunction a little bit when we have heightened stress and under stress for a really long period of time. Our brain thinks that we're in danger and can be in this constant fight, flight, freeze state, and that really impacts how we relate to people around us. So I just want you to have a look at this, because it does impact people's responses to things, and also something that you need to consider when you're going to support someone.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help us survive. Our fight, flight or freeze survival response, the FFF for short, is designed to mobilize our brain and body to fight an enemy, run from an avalanche, or freeze to hide from a predator. Our brain sometimes misinterprets safe situations as dangerous and can set off false alarms. When the amygdala, our brain's watchdog, senses and barks danger, our body enters survival mode quicker than our rational mind can react, leaving it trying to figure out why we feel in mortal danger. When the FFF alarm is sounded, we start to breathe more quickly and shallow, causing hyperventilation, and our heart starts beating very fast. These changes can cause strong chest pain, which many people interpret as symptoms of a heart attack, when in fact it's just a result of the FFF activation, which can be relieved through breathing exercises. As a way of getting you ready for action, blood is diverted towards the major muscle groups. Blood flows away from our digestive system, causing the bladder to relax, and we might feel the need to pee. The mouth goes dry, nausea can occur, and we get the butterflies feeling in our stomach. Blood also rushes from extremities, leaving us with cold hands, but often sweaty palms as the action-ready body starts sweating to avoid overheating. Legs and hands can start trembling and feel weak, while tension starts building in big muscles like the thighs, neck, and shoulders. In our head, FFF alarms cause our brain to focus on negative memories, probably so it can scan them to avoid danger and negative outcomes. We get tunnel vision as our pupils dilate to increase our focus and long vision, but as a result we lose our peripheral vision. FFF activation also reduces our ability to recognize differences in facial expressions. Too much oxygen and too little CO2 can result in dizziness or lightheadedness, which many people interpret as signs that they might faint. But because fainting is caused by a drastic drop in blood pressure, and because the FFF increases both our heart rate and blood pressure, it's nearly impossible to faint when this happens. Over time, depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress all harm the brain's ability to slow or cancel false FFF activations, causing them to happen more often. Knowing the symptoms of false activations makes it easier to recognize and reduce their effects. At Brave, you can learn both bottom-up and top-down techniques to reduce
All right. So as he explained, people who experience prolonged periods of anxiety and depression are more likely to be triggered into this fight, flight, freeze response much more regularly, and under circumstances that are not life-threatening, and may not even seem stressful to someone else. It also alters the person's perspective on situations, meaning they're more likely to feel attacked and threatened easily. And this is where I go back to recognizing that if someone's reacting and behaving quite strongly to a situation that doesn't seem like it matches what's happening, be mindful of this and that it's possible that they might be struggling with their mental health, and their reactions, their strong feelings are actually nothing to do with you.
humans.
Okay. So another thing I want to touch on before I talk about how you can support someone is mirror neurons. So this plays a really big part into how we respond to someone in distress, and also how they respond to us. This picture here is a picture of my gorgeous little stepdaughter and her dad. And it's a really, I've chosen this picture because it's a really good image of how mirror neurons work and mirror neurons in action. So you can see that her dad is smiling down at her and she is mirroring him and smiling back. So mirror neurons are in the frontal lobe of our brain and they fire when we're around others. And the first time that these were discovered was in an experiment with monkeys. And they had electrodes in the monkey's brain, and they observed the monkey when he was eating, I can't remember what he was eating, a banana, let's say. And they watched all these neurons fire in his brain. And then they had a person eating in front of the monkey, and the same neurons were firing in his brain when he was watching the person eating as what was happening when he was eating. And these are the mirror neurons. And they are really important because they help as in our development, they help us to learn. We watch others, and that's our mirror neurons firing and help us to kind of mimic their behavior. But they really impact how we are feeling and how we are behaving based on those around us. An example of this that I often like to give is when you walk into a room full of people and no one is saying anything, but you can feel the tension. You can feel that something is going on in there, but you have no idea what, and no one is saying anything. So how do you know that? How do you know that something is going on and that there's tension there? It's your mirror neurons. Your mirror neurons are picking up on how the other people in the room are feeling, and in turn, then you're feeling the same way. But you actually don't know what's happened, but it's your mirror neurons that are picking up on those things and influencing how you're feeling. So when we're around people experiencing strong emotions, our mirror neurons pick up on this, and we can begin to feel the same range of emotions, which is why I'm telling you this now, because it's really important to be aware of when we're stepping into a space of supporting someone who's struggling with their mental health, is that we can start to feel those same feelings. And it's really important for you to be mindful of this, to be able to then pick up on it and kind of mentally say to yourself, okay, that's not my feeling, that's their feeling. Um, but it's also important for you to be mindful of, because mirror neurons can obviously work the other way. So if you can be mindful of it, and you remain nice and calm, you will in turn help to calm the other person down, because their mirror neurons will pick up on how you're feeling. Um, this is why I often say, in a support situation, the best thing that you can do for someone is, it's not about what you're saying, it's about how you are. It's about remaining as calm as possible. The calmer you are, the more calm they're going to be. All right. So now that we've kind of gone through those background things, I will step into a space of when to go about having a conversation about mental health. Um, so we'll be looking at some different, obviously we've gone through some signs of when someone might be struggling with their mental health, but this kind of goes into a little bit more detail. So you might notice the person seems different to their usual self. Um, there's been a change in their behavior. Um, they appear withdrawn or more quiet than normal. They appear exhausted all the time or have low energy and motivation. The person, as I've mentioned already, is easily annoyed and frequently irritable, which is out of character for them. I guess this is something to highlight. It's that out of character for them. So people can be quiet and can be introverted, and it doesn't mean that they're struggling with their mental health. That just might be that person and who they are. So that being mindful of, it's out of character for them. Um, they are not as present, procrastinating often, making more mistakes than normal, and they're not finishing tasks as they normally would do. And they appear to be worrying excessively about anything and everything, things that don't seem all that important to you, they're really fixated on. So by starting a conversation with someone that you're concerned about, it helps them to feel kind of less alone. Often when we're struggling with our mental health, whether it's true or not, can often feel really alone and unseen. Um, so simply by reaching out to them, you can help them to open up. You can help them to realize that they're not alone, and help them to share their concerns and feelings with you. You can also then help them to access further support if need be. All right. So, how do you go about starting a conversation? Having a chat to someone about their mental health and well-being is hard. And I think often we can be quite nervous about it, which often people then will just avoid having the conversation. Um, and I guess this is where you don't have to have all the answers. There's no one way about talking to someone. Um, it's just about showing that you care and that you're concerned about them. And if you're not going to ask the question, you're not going to check in on them, who is going to? Is there someone else that will check in on them? Maybe there's not. So if you notice something different in someone and you're worried about them, then you're probably better off reaching out to them and asking that question, because someone else might not. And they might not be okay. And you might be the difference that helps to put them on the path of getting support that they need. Um, so, but yes, there's not necessarily one way of going about it, but timing is really important. Choose a time and place that's comfortable and provides privacy. So don't go up to a person when there's a heap of other people around and be like, oh, I'm worried about you. Are you all right? So, put someone on the spot in that situation can be quite embarrassing and can seem a bit ingenuine. Um, so pick your timing. You might notice that they're not okay, but it might not be the right time to talk in that moment. Um, so sit with it and check in on them a little bit later. Or it might be in that situation, you want to make sure that you do check in with them so that you don't miss the opportunity. So in that circumstance, it might be walking up to them and going, hey, can we catch up for a cuppa later? You're instigating something, but you're not putting them on the spot and making them feel uncomfortable. Um, so when you're in a quiet and confidential space, it can be as simple as asking, is everything okay? You don't seem yourself. Are you okay? Um, if you can, think of some real examples that you have observed in the person. You seeming really quiet lately, and not quite yourself. Um, I'm I'm a bit worried about you. Or it might be, yeah, like I've said, let's go for a coffee. You look like you could use a listening ear. Um, there's no right way about starting this conversation. It's just about being genuine in it, and caring and making sure that you pick your space, um, and make sure that you have the time to actually have the discussion. There is absolutely no point in asking someone to open up in this space if in 10 minutes time you've got a meeting that you've got to rush to or you've got to race off. um, Make sure that you've got the time to actually sit there and stay with them for as long as is needed. If you're looking at your clock and they're seeming like, and they're feeling like you have somewhere else to be, um, that can really shut it down and make them feel like, again, it's not genuine and it's a tokenistic question, but you don't genuinely care about them. So again, this is where that timing is really crucial. So once you have initiated the discussion, um, how do you keep it going? And this again is a difficult one. And if you have a really good relationship with the person, it might be a bit easier. But if you don't, it can be a little bit more tricky. And I guess this is where these sorts of tips can be quite helpful. Um, encourage them to open up by using open questions. For example, what's on your mind? That they can't respond to that with a yes or no answer. So that's why it's an open question. They need to elaborate a little bit more. A closed question is where they can respond with a yes or no answer. So another example might be, tell me a little bit about what's going on for you at the moment. So you're inviting them to open up. You actually don't need to say an awful lot. The best thing that you can do, as I mentioned before, is to remain calm and to listen. Allow them the space to actually think about what's going on for themselves and to open up and be heard. Um, Often, even our closest friends and family, um, when they listen to us, they're listening to respond. And they're wanting to problem solve and to fix things, which is actually often not helpful when someone is struggling. They just need you to be there and to listen to them and to genuinely empathize with what's going on. Um, so silence, whilst it can feel a bit uncomfortable, um, often it provides a space for the person to really kind of formulate their thoughts and to um, articulate how they're feeling. So don't be afraid of silence in this situation. Sit there and be prepared to sit in that kind of uncomfortable silence to give the person the space that they need to be able to speak about what's going on for them. If it does go on for a little bit too long and you feel like they're waiting for you to say something, that's when you can ask some more open questions to get them talking a little bit more, but then sit back and let them talk. Um, don't try to problem solve and fix it for them like often our friends and family do. It's better to say things like, that sounds really difficult. I don't know what to say, than to try to fix it for them or to continue kind of talking when silence would be more important. Um, and avoid trying to step in to talk about your own story. So often I know myself when I've been experiencing something challenging, when I've lost a loved one, often what people tend to do is talk about their own experience that's like that because they feel a little bit uncomfortable and they're not sure what to say. But that can feel really, it can feel like the other person's minimizing what you're feeling, that they're not at all understanding how you're feeling in this moment. They're just trying to talk about what happened for them. Um, so um, try not to step in that space. Try to remember that this is their story, this is their moment, and just sit with them in that um, uncomfortable silence sometimes. Sometimes you can't make it better. There's no words that you can say that can make it better sometimes. But by being there and allowing the person to open up and allowing them to realize that they're not alone, that can help. That can make even the most difficult things more bearable. So yes, as I've said, listen, give the person time to talk without interrupting them or providing advice. Let them speak and avoid temptation to fill that silence. And then reflect back things that you've heard to show that you've heard them and that you've understood. So it might be saying, I'm hearing that you're feeling really overwhelmed. Is that right? Just to make so that they know that you've heard them. And even if you get that wrong, they might say, no, I'm not overwhelmed. I'm really angry. They're not going to be annoyed that you've got it wrong, but they're correcting you in that space, which is actually really good for you too, because then you're getting the right feeling that they're not overwhelmed, they're angry. Okay. So it's really, as I've said, listening and remaining calm is really important in these situations. So, as well as kind of acknowledging what they're feeling and normalizing their reactions. So, it's really understandable that you're feeling that way under these circumstances so that they don't feel like their reactions are silly or that they're completely alone in how they're feeling. This gorgeous photo here is actually a photo of my brother and his daughter. And it's a beautiful depiction of him being the really calm, steady comfort that my niece needed. She had just fallen over and hurt her knee before this photo and was quite distraught. And he picked her up and he just put his head on her forehead and was really calm. And that helped her to calm almost instantly. Um, and that is referred to as co-regulation. That's where you're using your calmness to calm the other person. Their mirror neurons are picking up on yours and they're co-regulating with you and becoming calm. So in this case with my brother, by regulating his emotions and remaining calm, he helped her to calm down. So by you being that calm influence, you can really help support the other person to calm. And once they are calm, they can then start to open up a little bit more. When people are in a heightened state of stress, their brains are in survival mode. So they're in that fight, flight, freeze mode, which often results in them struggling to articulate how they're feeling. They can seem quite vague, and they're also really they're unable to process information in a way that they might be able to normally. So when they're in this heightened state, there is no point in you talking at them constantly because they won't be able to hear it. They won't be able to process it. Their brain is not working in a way that it normally would, so they can't really rationalize what you're feeling. When our brains are in this state, our reactions and responses aren't considered rational like they normally are. They're completely instinctual, which means a person's unlikely to be able to hear what you're saying and respond appropriately. They might appear like they're listening and that they're looking at you, but their brain is looking for danger. So they might be looking straight through you for any possible threat, which is why remaining calm is so important, and why I spoke about mirror neurons earlier. Because as I mentioned, if you remain nice and calm and steady, you will help to calm the other person and provide a space where they can begin talking. So the goal here is to help calm the person and the situation down. If they're yelling or angry, it can be really difficult to retrieve any sort of logical information. So when they're in distress, they might be repeating the same things over and over again. You might find that they seem unable to formulate sentences clearly, but if you remain calm, talk smoothly, don't argue, just listen, you will help them to calm down. But be mindful of not saying calm down, because that's actually likely to have the opposite effect. I quite like the phrase, never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down. The best way that you can help someone to calm down is to remain calm yourself. And only once they're nice and calm will they be able to articulate what's going on for them. And it can take about 30 minutes for the nervous system to calm down after being in a state of fight, flight, freeze. Because that's how long it takes for the chemicals to settle down in our system. So be mindful that that's how long it can take for them to actually hear what you're saying and to be able to articulate a meaningful, considered sentence. So in this space, it's just about acknowledging how they're feeling, listening, and allowing that space for the person to open up and to calm down, and to be able to then understand exactly what's happening for themselves. It's about creating safety and comfort. Next up, I have another little clip that I want to show you. And it's about when you're in this space and when you're sitting with someone who's in discomfort, the importance of empathizing with them versus sympathizing. And this clip by Brené Brown explains that so beautifully, the difference between sympathy and empathy. And when you're in this space of supporting someone, it's really important that you understand the difference.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, I've watched that clip so many times, and every time I sit and go, oh, it's so correct. Connection. It's about connection. In fact, there was a study done maybe 5 years ago on. It was actually about therapeutic response for people, and what was what gave the best outcomes for people when they were going to see therapists. And it was looking at different models of therapeutic approaches that counsellors took. But by far, what was the defining factor in people getting a good result out of their therapy had nothing to do with the models that the therapists were using. It was about the rapport between the person and the therapist. And the same goes for if you're in this space of supporting someone. It's about connection and rapport with the person, and not so much about what you're saying. It's about them feeling genuinely supported and heard and not alone. So I guess once you've sat in that space with them and you've helped to calm their nervous system down, and got them to a space where they can actually start talking and opening up with you, this is where you can then step into the space of actually helping and offering some practical assistance. As I mentioned earlier, often when people are in distress, they might be going over the same thing over and over again. They might be focusing and fixated on one particular thing. This will likely be an indicator of what they need your help with in this moment. If they don't have the words to articulate what they need, you can often pick up some non-verbal signs of what they need. For example, when a person's in a state of shock, they can often feel really cold and start shivering. So that's due to the body's fight, flight, freeze instinct, because the blood rushes to their extremities to help them fight and flight, and that results in them feeling really cold. So therefore, if you notice that they're shivering, you might want to offer them an extra layer of clothing or a blanket. This is where it's that real practical stuff. It's about what they're needing in this moment. It's not about looking at long-term solutions at this point. It's about identifying ways of meeting their current needs, addressing their immediate needs and concerns, and potentially then connecting them in with local support services. It could be quite simple things. It could be offering to make them a drink or getting them something to eat. If you're uncertain and you don't feel like they have told you or that you can observe what they need, ask the simple question, what do you need from me right now? They might just need to go to the toilet. It's usually something quite simple. They might need your help to send a message to someone or make a phone call, or they might need you to help kind of look up some possible support services for them. Next, it's connecting them in with social supports and talking future. So when I'm saying talk future, I'm not talking about months or years from now. It's about shifting their focus from I guess the really difficult stuff that you might be talking about in this moment, to think about what's happening next. So it might be simply saying something like, "What are your plans for this evening?" Or "What are you doing tomorrow?" And when asking this, you're also trying to assess, after this conversation, are they going home to an empty house? Or are they going to have someone there to support them when they get home? Because it might not be appropriate for them to go home on their own. And that's where, again, going back to that practical assistance, you could help connect them in with someone, and make sure that they're not going home alone. You could offer to call someone to pick them up, so that you know that they're getting home safely. So you assist to kind of contact someone from their social network, help contact friends, loved ones, colleagues. And sometimes it can be about helping them to identify who they can turn to. As I mentioned earlier, often when people are really struggling with their mental health, they would withdraw from their family and friends. And what I often like to kind of point out to people is that they're not a burden. Your friends and family care about you, and I'm sure they would much prefer to hear from you when you're struggling, and to be there to support you, than to find out later that you were struggling and they had no idea. I know personally for me, with my close friends and family, it doesn't matter what I have going on for me. If my friends are struggling, at no point do I ever see them as a burden. I would much rather they called me and told me that they were struggling and that they needed me than, yeah, to find out later that they weren't okay and I had no idea and I could have helped them, but I didn't know. As I mentioned, help kind of shift their thinking from this current space to future. So talk about, yeah, what's happening later, how are they getting home, what are they up to tomorrow. You could also potentially offer in this space to check in with them in a few days. But if you offer to do that, if you offer to connect with them later, make sure that you put a reminder in your calendar, in your phone, and that you've actually follow through on it, because it's actually quite damaging to that rapport if you say you're going to do something and you don't follow through on it. Any work that you've done in this space to help build rapport and connection and help them to feel like you're supporting them will all come undone if you say you're going to contact them and you don't. So make sure you follow through on it is the one thing. If you don't think that you can follow through on it, then don't offer. The idea of this space is about and about talking future is to help promote their natural resilience, and kind of tap into what has helped them in the past. And friends and family are really good sources of our natural resilience. And yeah, identify future links. So that could be with you, could be with their friends and family. Have they got anything coming up in the next few days? Any social connections? If not, encourage them to do this. So when should you seek further assistance? So when is your support not going to be enough to help a person in a situation? because there are absolutely circumstances when you will need to seek further assistance, when the situation is just too challenging and what's going on for the person is far too big for you to be able to deal with on your own. And that could be if the person is at risk of self-harm or it has suicidal behaviour. If the person's behaviour poses a risk to those around them, or if they're showing signs of psychosis. So, for example, any delusions, paranoia, they're hearing voices that aren't there. These are all situations when you would need to seek further assistance. So it might be helping take them to their GP, or if it's really severe, taking them to hospital. Sometimes it might be sitting with them and calling 000, depending on the situation. And I guess that's where you do a little bit need to make those judgment calls yourself, because it is a bit of a case-by-case scenario. If someone discloses that they're suicidal, don't panic. The person wouldn't have said this to you if you hadn't made them feel comfortable. So it's actually a really good sign that they have felt really comfortable with you and they feel like you're a safe person for them to be able to open up to. Always take it serious. If someone says that they're feeling suicidal, they absolutely are in that moment. It doesn't mean they're going to follow through on it, but in that moment, they are feeling suicidal, and it's really important that you take it serious. Stay with them and reach out for assistance. No one expects you to be a suicidal intervention expert. But if you're sitting with someone in that space, stay with them until you can get further support. So in an emergency situation, if you feel like their life is at a kind of immediate risk, call 000 and stay with them until an ambulance arrives. If it doesn't feel like it's an immediate threat, but you don't feel like the person can go home on their own and be safe, then it might be taking them to the hospital emergency department and getting support for them, staying with them until they've got that support. Another option, if they've disclosed that they have had suicidal thoughts, but it's not something they're going to act on immediately, this is where it might be good to call Lifeline. So Lifeline is free and it's available 24 hours, 7 days a week, all year. And they have professional trained suicide experts who can help kind of either talk to you, or you can put them on the phone to the person, and they can help kind of talk through some next steps and put a bit of a safety plan in place. It would also be important to call a family member, a friend, or connect them in with their GP. All right, so this has been all quite kind of heavy stuff. Supporting other people is really valuable and really wonderful, and can be really rewarding, but it can also take an awful lot out of you. And that's where it's really important that you also look after yourself. So yes, self-care encourages you to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself, so that you can transmit good feelings to others. You can't give to others what you don't have yourself. So you are the most important person in your life. It is really important that you care for yourself so that you can actually then care for others. I have another little clip that I want to show you, which I think really paints a really good picture of what happens to us when we're constantly giving and constantly supporting other people, and the impact that it has on us, and why self-care is really important. So I'll show you that. It's just a short clip. I really like that clip. And look, for me, I'm a huge animal lover, so I love the dog at the end and how the dog kind of takes all of that heaviness and darkness away. Animals can be a really important part of self-care. Obviously, they're not for everyone, um, but if you are an animal lover and you have pets, talking to them, giving them big cuddles, can be really, really good for your mental health. Um, Another thing that's really good for your self-care is exercise. It doesn't have to be strenuous exercise. You don't have to be going for a run like these lovely fit people appear to be doing. It's simply about getting moving, getting your blood flowing. It's very good for our brains. So it can be anything, yeah, anything that gets your blood pumping. So it could be going for a walk. If you've got a dog, take your dog for a walk. If the weather's not good, it could be uh, doing some indoor activities. It could be going for a swim at the local pool, could be going on the treadmill. Any physical activity is really good. Getting outside in the clear air is definitely preferable, but anything that kind of gets you moving is really good. Do things that bring you joy. Often when life gets busy, um, or if we're struggling with our own mental health, the first things that kind of drop off are the fun things and the things that actually fill our cup and help us to feel better. So sometimes it's about looking at back on things that you've done in the past and what makes you happy and what brings you joy. Um, I've put this photo in here because it's a photo of my daughter and I in a field of sunflowers. Sunflowers are my favorite flowers, and I just think they're so happy. But I love this photo of my daughter and I, and this outing really kind of filled me with joy. It doesn't have to be anything really big, but make some time to do things that cheer you up and that fill your cup and bring you joy. So that will be different for everyone. For me, as I said, sunflowers are my favorite flowers. So going out into a field of sunflowers absolutely filled my cup. Was definitely one of my favorite places to be. And if you're not really doing anything at the moment, look back on things that you've enjoyed in the past. What haven't you done for a while? And maybe start doing it again. Um, Slot in a little bit of time each day to do something for you, something that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to set aside a couple of hours. It can just be something that's 10 minutes. It could be, sitting down and doing a crossword. It could be picking up a, a fictional book if you haven't been reading for a while and kind of losing yourself in the fiction. It could be pulling out some of the old board games and sitting down with some friends and or your children or your partner. It could be going out and kicking the football. Could be catching up with friends. So pick up that phone and send a message or make a call and make that dinner date or movie date with your friends. Make the time to do those things for you. Another thing that can be really good for you and your self-care is mindfulness. And this is something that often takes a little bit of practice and can take a little bit of time for you to kind of find the right fit for you. There's lots of mindfulness apps that you can download on your phone or your tablet. And watch or listen to, but there's also heaps of different clips available on YouTube for free. You might have to listen to a few different ones. There's lots of different styles, lots of different voices. I know for me, there are certain accents that I find aren't relaxing and aren't helpful for mindfulness, but for other people that might work for them. So if you listen to one and it doesn't feel right for you, then I'd encourage you to try a few different ones because you might find the right fit. Just because it doesn't sound right and feel right to begin with doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do it, or that you're not going to find something that does work for you. Mindfulness can be a really good way for you to kind of get out of your own head and to stop that really busy racing mind. It can help particularly at bedtime. I know I have a 12-year-old daughter who's just has a mind that races constantly. And mindfulness for her is a really great way for her to switch off at night and be able to get to sleep. So she listens to mindfulness every evening until she goes to sleep, and it's really, really helped her. Whereas before she started the mindfulness, her mind would be racing and sometimes she'd still be awake at midnight. And now she puts some mindfulness on and within 10 minutes, she's asleep. Yeah, as I said, there's lots of different styles and options that should suit almost anyone. So it's a bit of a trial and error thing. Have a listen to different options, download some apps and see how you go. Mindfulness really helps you to see and make sense of your emotions, thoughts, and feelings. And as I said, it can help you to unwind. It also helps you to become better equipped to manage strong emotions. So if you're going into a space where you're going to support someone, mindfulness can really help you to manage that a lot better. And it can also help you to prioritize what you put your energy into. So next up for self-care is staying connected, connecting with others. Remaining connected is hugely important to mental health. And as I said, it's one of the first things that drops off when people are struggling is they tend to self-isolate and not connect in with people as often and become a bit more withdrawn. So if you find yourself doing that, you might need to make the effort to connect in with people again. It might feel uncomfortable, but it's very important. But it's about finding the right people. Find the people who lift you up. Find the people that fill your cup rather than drain it. So we all have those people in our lives, and it doesn't mean we don't care about them, but they're the people that when you catch up with them, you feel more exhausted after catching up with them and drained rather than lifted. This photo here is a photo of me with my two closest friends. And it doesn't matter what is going on in any of our lives. When I catch up with them, I always feel uplifted and they always fill my cup. So these are my people. These are my people that I turn to, particularly when I'm having a rough time, because I know they will undoubtedly fill my cup. But I have other friends that I will always be friends with them, but when I'm flat, they're probably not the ones I'm going to call because I often find that I end up supporting them and they drain my cup, but they don't fill it. So yeah, it's about picking who the people are that you're connecting in with particularly when you're in a space that you're a bit more vulnerable. Make the time to catch up or make that phone call. Life can be busy. And when life's hectic and overwhelming, as I said, we tend to withdraw from our loved ones. So therefore, sometimes you actually need to push yourself, create the space and make the time to keep connected with people. All right, so we're almost at the end. What I do want to touch on are some possible support services. So these are support services that you might find really helpful when you're supporting someone else. These could be potential referral pathways for you. So one of them is Alcohol and Drug Foundation. So that's their phone number and their website. The other is Lifeline. Now, I did touch on that a little bit earlier. They offer crisis and emotional support, and that's their phone number and their website. They also have lots of kind of useful tools and tip sheets on their website. So I would encourage you to actually with all of these resources to, when you have the time, hop on their website and have a look at the tools and resources that they have available. Most of them will have kind of tip sheets that you can download that offer kind of talking points for when you're dealing with someone who might be struggling with their mental health. They have some great free webinars and things like that. So I definitely encourage you to have a look. Beyond Blue is another one. They have lots of free resources around depression and anxiety, as well as resources particularly kind of focused on different age groups, men and women, youth. Heads Up is another one. So they have some great free resources for better mental health. You also have the Black Dog Institute. So their focus is around depression, anxiety, and stress. They also have a personalized self-help tool, which is called My Compass. But Black Dog also have an awful lot of great resources, some short little clips around having difficult conversations. Another one is Switchboard Victoria. So this is specific for LGBTQIA+ people. And they offer peer-driven support services as well as counselling services. And then there's Embrace Multicultural Mental Health, which is a platform for multicultural communities to access mental health resources. So that is it from me for this session. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me talk today. And I hope that you've found this session really helpful. Thank you.